Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Tiny Classroom Training Live. We're thrilled to have you here as we embark on enhancing your professional skills. This session focuses on key insights for approaching every generation. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat as our coaches Don Zalou and Artie Nathan will be answering some as we move along. Let me pass the microphone to our esteemed coaches who will guide us through today's session. Artie and Don, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Juan. And Don, it's good to see you again. And it's good to continue this conversation about the different generations in the workforce because it's a confusion trying to figure out what do I need to do when approaching each generation. The last time, Don, we talked about the generations and what was behind their thinking. Now we're
Yeah.
going to talk about what they bring to the workplace and how you deal with them.
How do you deal with it? That's a speed bump we run into on almost every client we work with is the challenge of working with these 3 or 4, sometimes even 5 generations in a workplace. So let's talk a little bit about and focus on the process, give it a little depth. And so let's start with baby boomers, 1946 to 1964. You and I are proud members of that particular generation. Yes, very proud. But why don't you start us out with that, Artie?
Well, I like to think that baby boomers have a strong work ethic, and they equate long hours with productivity and success. They're focused on their careers because that's what brought job security. And most of us spent most of our career at 1 or 2 employers. And I guess when it comes to leadership styles, it's all about the hierarchy, the chain of command. And we tend to follow things like that.
We certainly do. And the technology subject is we've almost become a laughing stock in a way to the younger generations. Many of us have adapted fairly well, but it's all been a struggle. And this technology thing is changing so rapidly. It for this generation, it's been more of a struggle than an easy entree. And communications, our generation generally prefers sort of face-to-face interaction, or even phone calls over digital communications. I know you and I both say to friends of ours to say, well, let's just text them, and we say, wait a minute, just call them, and there's an interesting dialogue that goes on there. A motivation, this generation responds well to recognition for their experience and loyalty. That whole idea of catching people doing it right really came out of our generation, didn't it?
Yeah. And so I guess in the end,
Yeah.
as a manager, you should respect the baby boomers' experience and involve them in mentoring programs since they're the old timers in the workplace now, and provide technology training to them if needed, because it's a hard thing to get used to if you haven't done it all your life. So,
Absolutely. Both of us still trip over it, but we're better than many. So let's go on to Generation X. It's born 1965 to 1980, I think.
yeah, we were teenagers when this generation was getting born.
Yeah,
They look for a work-life balance. The first generation really that looked for it, and they were more interested in independence, seeking self-reliance, and they valued autonomy in their work, and they were highly adaptable. We were pretty rigid. They're adaptable, experience significant changes, and they adapt to them.
that's right. But along with that adaptability comes skepticism. This generation was sort of the first generation that really became cynical about corporate policies and marketing. Well, why are we doing it that way? Well, why do you want it that way? It's that kind of stuff, which began immediately to irritate the baby boomer generation. And leadership style. This generation, the Gen X, prefers a more collaborative approach rather than a top-down approach to management, which we were kind of used to. Communication, again, we'll see this throughout generations. Comfortable with both traditional and digital communication. It's the first generation that really sort of got used to working with digital methods. I think. What about the approach?
And they appreciated flexible work arrangements. You and I, we were pretty rigid, but they were into more flexible, and it was confusing. to the managers who were dealing with them because they hadn't seen that before. And they were looking for opportunities for skill development. They didn't bring all the skills that they needed. They wanted to be trained at work, and that was something different. And they wanted to be involved in the decision-making process, not the old hierarchy. They wanted a seat at the table.
Yeah,
So
part of
it,
Yeah.
we were there, you and me, Don. So we saw this happening. And to us, it was a curiosity. To our bosses, it was a revolution. And then we moved right into the millennials. And that's what started this course, because people back when we did this course were
Yeah.
saying, how do I deal with these millennials? I'm lost.
A lot of people say, what the hell's a millennial? What's going on here, right? So millennials were born 81 to 1996. They're purpose-driven. They really seek meaning. This generation seems to seek meaning in their work and want to make a positive impact. Interesting throwback to our generation, isn't it? So there's a skipping going on here as well. And feedback, they really sort of want regular feedback and recognition for their contribution. Again, catch people doing it right. And they looked very strongly at career development. They want the value, the whole generation values opportunities for growth and for learning. And so they're very powerful in that way. What are some other elements here?
Wow, they preferred a collaborative work environment. They
Yeah.
were really into team-oriented workspaces as opposed to their own office.
Yeah.
Technology, this is where it went off the charts because they were digital natives. They grew up with it and expected it. And they also started to expect a little work-life integration. And it started to blur the lines between work and their personal lives. And it set up the next generation's response to that. And
They did. So the best way to approach these folks is with a very clear career path. We want to offer them lots of feedback very frequently, and emphasize the company's values and social responsibility, and kind of leverage technology into the work process for them. This is a continual adaptation to technology and involvement.
it was weird because right here is where the divide started, where, for us, it was work. And then
Yeah.
work was over and we went home.
Yeah.
Here, work and life started to blend.
Mhm.
And people got comfortable with that. And then we moved right into Gen Z, kids that were born around the end of the last century. And everybody was afraid of what was going to happen in 2000. What really was going to happen was these kids were going to start coming into the workplace. This is where it started to get even more critical because there was a digital immersion here. I mean, they didn't know anything but digital. And they were comfortable with it to the extent that the rest of us were not. And diversity and inclusion, I think this is where diversity really took over. Everybody started to value it, and they really did, and included in the work. And they had an entrepreneurial spirit, And again, we go back to our generation. The boss owned the place, and
Yeah.
now, the kids coming into it wanted a piece of the action.
I'm still chuckling about born in the previous century. That's still weird. 25 years later, 24 years later, this generation has a real global perspective. They often have very strong awareness of global issues and the diverse cultures, which is really, really a nice thing to see and a very positive thing to see. A very mental health awareness. Perhaps the most of any generation so far. It places a very high importance, I think, on mental health. And again, that work-life balance thing that we've seen for several generations now. And communication, again, prefer brief, visual forms of communication, video, Zoom calls like we're doing this recording on, and so on and so forth. There's more a trait of this generation, which I think we can probably trace into the digital awareness that they have and the digital immersion. So how would we approach these folks, Marty?
They prefer a diverse and inclusive work environment.
Mm.
They want to have opportunities for innovation. They want to be able to have their own side hustles while doing their own job, and sometimes those are connected. And they use visual and interactive training methods. Don, you and we stand up in front of a classroom. These kids don't even have any idea what a classroom should be like at work. I mean, they get it quickly on the phone and get out of there, and emphasize the company's social impact. Imagine workers having a say or an interest in the company's social impact. It's a whole new world. And going through these and there's another one here now. There's a generation alpha. We're not even going to go into that because they're not in the workplace yet. But these kids in Gen Z are in the workplace. So you gotta now know that if Don and I are still there, you're dealing with four different generations. And so what are the key strategies for managing all of these generations together in the workforce, Don?
And that's a good subject, because how do we homogenize the whole thing so that we can get work done and move forward? So promoting cross-generational mentoring programs is a very good thing. It facilitates knowledge transfer and it builds understanding and trust. So if you put a Gen Z in the room with a baby boomer and they are mentoring each other and discussing and so on both sides of that fence learn a lot. That's a very positive thing. Offering flexible work arrangements to accommodate these different life stages and preferences is very powerful. It seems hard to do at first, but once you put your mind to it, it's actually not that difficult. And diverse communication channels that cater to different preferences, and we've already seen that in the generations we've talked about already. What about some other things?
I think you got to focus on skills and competencies rather than age.
Yeah.
And your older workers are going to focus on age, and your younger workers are going to focus on skills and competencies. And that means you, as the leader of this group, have to value both sides of it and blend it together and show that you respect both sides, but also tell people that you see the advantage of really doing this together, and create a culture of continuous learning to keep everybody engaged, up to date. And where you might think that the older generations, well, they know all they need to know, but they don't. They won't say that they don't know or understand some of this new stuff. Just assume that they don't and provide it in their continuous learning package. And for the younger kids, you got to keep showing them why we got here, how we got here, and blend that into the continuous learning.
And customized recognition. Each generation receives recognition sort of in a different wavelength, and it's easy enough to customize that and even weave it through an employee of the month meeting or something like that. You can weave and address all those generations at once if you think about it. And it's extremely important to foster an inclusive environment that values that diverse perspectives and experiences. And again, there's ways of doing that build trust and knowledge across the board, but you have to be open and thoughtful about it. What are some things we should remember?
Well, before we get there, I think you have to emphasize that there really are enough common goals and shared values in everyone that you're dealing with that allows you to unite the different generations. Look, everybody appreciates a straight answer. So you have to have good communications. Everybody really wants to be treated respectfully. And so maybe you stress the golden rule to treat others the way you want to be treated, and open up when you feel like you're not. And people want to be respected. I mean, always respect every one of your employees in every generation, because if you don't, they're going to feel like somehow you don't respect them. And at the end of the day, everybody expects to be treated fairly, don't they, Don?
Absolutely, positively right. We're all human beings, and overemphasizing the different generations can lead to trouble too. So, yeah, as you said, respect, tell the truth, keep your agreements, be curious, catch people doing it right, say thank you. But there are individual differences within generations that are significant and need to be paid attention to. So really, I think the most effective approach is to understand the general trends while remaining open to each of the individual's needs and preferences and strengths. So listening asking good questions, being curious and respectful. Those things go a long way, don't they, Artie?
Yeah. And I guess the bottom line here is just don't be afraid. They're people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your whole team is made up of people.
Yeah.
And wherever they come from, your job is to bring them together. And
That's
your job is to understand them and help them understand each other.
Mhm.
So a good leader makes the best use of everyone in his or her team. And that includes every generation.
That's absolutely right. Right. So this, how do you want to end this? What do we want to say at the end of this?
Thank you for sitting in and listening to us.
Gosh, these two baby boomers and everybody. Hopefully, there's not just baby boomers listening to us here. So, thank you all for being here. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And next time, our subject is what does it mean to be an effective leader? Why and how, and to start with the end in mind as a notion. So, make sure you tune in 2 weeks from now.
And go to our website.
Yeah.
Check out Tiny Classroom Training, because what we're talking about is all covered in the Tiny Classroom